Hello, mamas. Welcome. I am here with Martine from the Mama Movement. She has this beautiful studio in downtown Moncton. Definitely arrange to check it out if you haven't already. Martine has a background in kinesiology and has a similar passion that I do when it comes to making sure that you have good quality information and education around preparing for your body, for pregnancy, for labor and birth, and for the postpartum time. And she is absolutely passionate about helping you navigate exercise and movement through that transition to motherhood. So I'm super excited to chat with her today. This is the first live interview that I've done in the same space as someone. So I apologize ahead of time if I feel a little bit back and forth. And I also wanted to let you know that Martine and I could probably talk for hours on this topic, but we're going to keep an eye on the time and really respect your time today and make sure that we're getting a digestible amount of information to you. And so if we have to do part 2 or round 2, we will definitely do that. So we will get to all of the topics that we promised. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I told Sarah this is my first Facebook Live.
Yeah,
so we're breaking the ice.
We're breaking the ice. Absolutely, absolutely. So, what are some things that women need to consider when it comes to navigating exercise, both prenatally and postpartum?
Yes. So one thing I like to tell women who are looking to exercise, let's do pregnancy first.
Yeah.
Choose something you love to do. Yes. So instead of going on the internet and being like, okay, I'm supposed to do these things, or typically we're often told to walk and swim, but some of us don't like to walk and some of us don't have a membership at the gym to go swimming. So I find that's limited information. So what do you like to do? Is it hiking? Is it walking? Do you like to do resistance training? If you were already doing some exercises. So always find something you love to do to start. Is a great thing for pregnancy. And also know that our bodies when we're pregnant aren't fragile.
Yes.
So often I have a lot of clients that come and they're like, I'm 13 weeks pregnant and I stopped exercising as soon as I knew I was pregnant because I'm not sure what I'm allowed to do, what's safe for me or safe for the baby. And I think it's really important to understand that we are not fragile. Mm-hmm. Our bodies are made to move whether we're pregnant or not. And the baby is really safe in the belly. There's a lot of liquid, there's a lot of space for the baby to move. And there's actually a lot of physiological benefits for both mom and the baby to exercise during pregnancy. And another thing I think we need to consider is choose exercises that are appropriate for the pelvic floor and the core. Oftentimes you might have some classes that say that it's safe for pregnancy, but you're all doing a lot of jumping, a lot of box squats, a lot of impact, which you may have no symptoms, but you may have symptoms and not know that they're something you need to look for.
Okay.
So for pregnancy and postpartum, I always tend to have the 4 Ps that I talk about. Jessie Mendel, one of my mentors, taught me this. So 4 Ps would be pain. You're looking for pain. You're looking for pressure coming down in the vagina. You're looking for peeing, and for peaking, which would be coning at the abdominal wall. Some women will see it, especially when they're pregnant and postpartum, along that midline. It's almost like a triangular, we call it sometimes Toblerone looking shape. So those 4 things or 4 Ps that I like to tell my clients, if you can be aware of those when you're doing some exercises, then you have awareness of how your body's reacting to that type of exercise. Yeah. And obviously pelvic health physiotherapist is my go-to for pregnant and postpartum women, that they should always have an appointment during that time.
So like you're saying, like an assessment during pregnancy and some guidance around, are there specific ways that they need to adjust some of their movements and that kind of thing?
Because one thing you need to consider when you're pregnant and even postpartum, you're going to have to do modifications.
Yes. Okay.
So either way, It's not, there's not a list. A lot of women are looking at me and they're like, what am I not allowed to do?
Yes.
Like, give me the no list.
The checklist.
The checklist. And I don't work like that. And you'll find it on Dr. Google often, where you're like, you can't crunch, you can't do these planks. But every body is different. Like every pregnancy journey is different. Every postpartum journey is different. So there's no list, but it's using different breathing strategies that we teach pregnant postpartum women how to manage pressure and symptoms when they have some occurring during exercises. And the postpartum is the same guideline. So I would say make sure you choose something you love.
Yes.
Be realistic with your goals.
Yeah.
The 4 P's. So look for pressure, peeing, peaking, and pain. And pain can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the pelvic floor or the core necessarily. Everything's associated with the core. And also for the postpartum women, there's this whole thing with the 6-week checkup.
Yes.
Right. So everybody thinks like you get the 6-week clearance from your doctor.
Yeah.
And you are good to go running. And and we can't be blamed. That's what we're often told.
Yes.
So the 6-week checkup basically is just that postpartum check to see if you've healed. So if you've had a C-section or a vaginal birth. But that doesn't mean you're cleared for all exercises. You may have symptoms. You have prolapse or incontinence or any of these symptoms. And we need to look at our mental health side as well. So for postpartum, there are the 4 R's, which is rest, recover, rehab, and re-strength. So there's phases to go through as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes we think that when we get that go ahead from the doctor, like, yes, you've healed well, that we can leap into what we were doing pre-pregnancy or even during pregnancy. But what our bodies are really calling us to do is to rest some more.
Yeah.
And to have an appointment with a pelvic health physio and say, is, the pelvic floor ready for exercise? Is it ready for some impact and that sort of thing?
Yeah, because it's short term for the long term health of our bodies.
Yes. Yeah. It feels long. It can feel really long. But absolutely, in the grand journey of things, that time period is quite short. Yeah. And so if we can really take care and listen to our bodies, I love those 4 P's and the 4 R's, because that's asking us to listen. We don't need to go outside of ourselves for a checklist or, to ask Dr. Google. What we really need to do is listen to our bodies and what they're telling us. So can you tell us one more time the 4 P's, which are for pregnancy and postpartum, and then the 4 R's for postpartum?
Yeah. So 4 P's would be when you're exercising, if you have any pain, regardless of where it is in your body, if you have pressure in the vagina, so that could be related to prolapse or a pelvic floor issue. If you have peaking, so in the abdominal wall, if you have too much pressure going in the abdominal wall, and if you're peeing, so that's another sign for the pelvic floor dysfunction. So those are great things to go by. And if you have something come up where you have one of the P's, there's no need to panic. Like, I don't want women to be like, oh no, this is it, I have to stop exercise. It's just feedback that our bodies are giving us. And we need to listen to that feedback and say, okay, so maybe this exercise is not appropriate, but a pelvic health physio is always the right place to go for that internal feedback that we can actually receive from them. And the 4 R's for postpartum is rest, recover, rehab, and re-strength. So the thing with rehab and re-strength that people kind of often merge them together is, let's say you're a runner and you want to get back to running. There's a period of rehab that needs to happen. So we need to re-strengthen our muscles in our legs and our core to actually be able to bring us to go for a 5K run again with no symptoms and without having the body in discomfort. So
it's really about preparing our bodies, because they do so many things for us while we're pregnant. Like, you grew a human being in your body and birthed. No matter how that birth unfolded, that's a big deal.
And we're recovering from that, which is a whole other aspect of.
Absolutely. And so to give our bodies time to engage in that healing process and finding nourishing ways that we can both move our bodies, but also gain some more strength and stability and that sort of thing is going to go a really long way to helping us maintain movement.
Yeah, long term.
Yeah.
Instead of the short term benefits.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let me see here. Oh, here's something. What are we often not talking about when it comes to exercise?
So one main thing, we're talking a lot about it more now, the pelvic floor and the core are things that we don't talk a lot about when we're talking about exercise, especially postpartum. Other things we don't talk about is symptoms that can occur when we're pregnant or postpartum. So I've had women come to me and say, like, a few weeks into class and be like, I have so much discomfort in this position. And I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, that's something we can address for sure. And they're like, well, I was told it's just pregnancy related. Right. And just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you have to live with discomfort. Like oftentimes there's something we can do, whether it's a pelvic health physio, whether it's an RMT, whether there's supplemental support. Like there's so many options and resources that we have that we don't discuss when we're doing exercises pregnant and postpartum.
So it's either like, oh, that's normal, you're supposed to feel that way during a pregnancy, or just don't do it.
Or just don't do it. And we often get the just don't do it. And one thing I love to discuss about things we don't consider when we're talking about exercise is the language of how we perceive exercise and why we're doing exercise and how it should be done. So I think there's a lot of pressure on how we are supposed to exercise when we're pregnant and the reasons why we're doing it. And as postpartum, there's all these other reasons that we feel the pressure to do exercise. So I think we need to consider there's going to be modifications needed during the pregnancy for the exercises that often we don't consider. Like some women will say, like, I've been doing exercises at the gym for 10 years and I'm not changing anything. And that's okay. That's totally up to your decision as well. But we can break that down and say, like, again, short-term benefits or long-term benefits. So is it worth it to go and push yourself 150%? What does it give you long term? So especially for the pelvic floor and the core, that's where I say, like, should I versus could I, which I often tell women.
Should I versus could
I? So let's say a box jump when you're 7 months pregnant. Could I do a box jump? I could probably do a box jump at 36 weeks pregnant right now. Should I do a box jump? Probably not. Like, it doesn't give me any benefit long term for my core and my pelvic floor. So there's that mindset, that athlete mindset sometimes that we have. So we need to consider why we're doing the exercises we're doing. So those are things that I think we don't talk about when we're talking about exercise. We kind of just like, oh, well, we have the end of the spectrum where it's like, we're pregnant, so we just need to walk and swim. Or there's the other end of the spectrum where it's like, I can still go hardcore, and I should still go hardcore.
And I should. That's where the should comes in that we have to be careful about. We should a lot on ourselves, right? We have certain expectations of how our bodies should still move and should still perform. And we sometimes forget all of the shifts and changes and adjustments that our bodies are making through that time to keep us safe, to keep our babies safe, to grow them, and all the while keep our own bodies functioning. So it's expected that there's going to have to be some shifts along the way.
And I think I emphasize a lot on trying to be present in the moment you are right now and understand that as much as it may be hard sometimes and challenging, it's a small chapter in that big story.
So hard and challenging to like scale down or to adjust.
So you need to understand that it's a 9-month, 10-month process for pregnancy. And that as the pregnancy goes along, you're going to feel a little more uncomfortable. Mobility is going to be a little more challenging. But those are small chapters in a long, extended book of life.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And you're gonna modify for that small amount of time. And postpartum, it's that same thing. It's like the journey of postpartum is so challenging because the baby's out and we think like, okay, baby's out, we can go, but it's small steps, small chapters that are hard and challenging at times. But you need to modify and honor our bodies because our bodies are working so hard to create a baby, to carry a baby, birth a baby, and then heal from that, which is traumatic. Yeah. So we need to honor our bodies and learn how to listen to the body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of listening within through that whole process. And I love that because that matches up a lot with the conversations that we've been having in other videos around, yes, it's important to have reliable resources outside of yourself when it comes to finding good quality information, but also having ways to tune in that present moment. How am I feeling? What needs to shift? And from that, maybe who do I need to reach out to for help to make those adjustments, whether it's Martine or, as she mentioned, a pelvic health physio who can be a really fantastic resource during that process. And so are there specific questions that you recommend that women take to their physicians prenatally, postpartum, when it comes to exercise and movement?
So prenatally, for sure, get the clearance from your doctor.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing. Sometimes we don't understand quite everything that goes on during our appointments. They go by so fast and we get a little bit of information, but not maybe the whole story. So I always recommend getting the okay from your physician to do exercise.
Because there are certain circumstances, even when we're listening to our bodies, those medical circumstances where a physician would say, look, this really isn't safe for you to do a particular type of exercise. Some might say blanket statement, it's not safe to do any exercise. And so even then too, asking some clarity around
the why.
Is it everything? And what's the why? And, you know, how can we maybe negotiate a little bit when it comes to that.
But that'll come to my second point where if they give you a blank statement and it's kind of like you can't exercise, but for your mental health you need to move in certain ways because we need to consider our mental health into why we're moving. Ask for the resources. So if they can't, we don't expect physicians to know how we're supposed to move our bodies pregnant and postpartum because that's why we study a whole other domain. But ask for the resources in your city or your province. Like, where can I find a solid resource in my city? And if there's none, then go online and see where you can find that information, where you can get a little more like, okay, I'm not supposed to lift more than 30 pounds. So how can I do movement within that structure that we're told that I can't move? So I think it's important to ask for those resources so that you can still move in the ways you want to move, but you're still considering that medical advice.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And the third, those would be prenatal and postpartum. And postpartum, which is your 6-week checkup, definitely ask for a physical clearance. So I want the physician to physically check your C-section scar and also your perineum. So sometimes they go fast and they'll ask you, like, do you want me to check? And you don't know. You're like, I don't know. And sometimes you walk out of there and they have it checked. So I want you to ask for a physical exam to make sure that everything has healed properly. So that when you're starting exercise, we have that actual clearance that there's no infection. The stitches are out, that there's clearance for the pelvic floor. And also ask for that prescription for the pelvic health physiotherapist. That should be your next stop coming out of the office. Or even beforehand, you can ask that when you're actually prenatal for that piece of paper. Just so we can get that prescription, but also engage in those conversations about pelvic floor with our physicians so that they're aware that maybe you are suspecting that you have some symptoms that maybe they're not aware of, so that you can have that discussion. That's important as well. And if you've had a C-section, ask them if they recommend C-section massage, and even perineum massage for the scarring, for tearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to goal setting, we live in a go culture, right? And in a goal setting culture, and that's often what we're wanting to do, not just with our exercise, but with our eating habits and our health in general, and those sorts of things. And so any particular tips that you have when it comes to, and I imagine some of it we've maybe sprinkled in already in our conversation, but any specific tips when it comes to setting goals for exercise during this particular time period?
I'll keep it to 3. my biggest thing when I discuss setting goals is the why. So why do you want to move your body? And there's no wrong answer. There's no like cliche answer I want you to tell yourself. But the why will give us such an important background information on why you want to get started.
That motivation
to get started. So is it because physically you're achy and you just want to move your body, you want to gain mobility, you feel like getting up off the floor and holding your baby is really hard, just doing your everyday lifestyle activities are hard, and you want to be strong enough to do those activities? And it's important to reflect on, is it an external factor that's creating that motivation, or is it an internal need for your body to move? The external factor could be, I'm now postpartum and I need to move my body because I don't have a baby inside me anymore. And everybody around me is talking about getting your body back and bouncing back after baby. And it's been 6 months, or it's been so many months, and I still have some weight to lose. Like, those are external factors, which are really great to be aware of. If they're present. And acknowledging them so that we know, if we're creating a routine with exercise, we know the why, so that we're being aware of how we're moving versus the results maybe that are created by the external factors. And even during pregnancy, I mean, we go to our appointments and sometimes they're weighing us every appointment. They're talking about BMI and they're talking about weight gain. So we become, those external factors become kind of part of our why sometimes, which is okay. Again, it's just bringing awareness and knowing that, are you moving because your body wants to move and it makes you feel more energized? It makes you feel really good physically and mentally, and you're feeling less emotional? Or is it just because you're trying to reach a goal from the external factors
that somebody else said you should be reaching? So it's that looking at that, where that goal's coming from. Is it something that someone or some article or some book said I should be doing? Or am I doing it because it feels good and because it supports my health? And sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other, and sometimes it's a combination of both. But having that awareness, is really important.
And acknowledging it is key. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having that external factor, but once you acknowledge it, you're like, oh, there's actually something else that's creeping in, that's pushing me, or I'm not even ready to do some exercise yet, but I feel that pressure to do it because of that external factor.
It releases some of that pressure, and some of that, maybe if we're not doing it yet, releases some of the guilt around not doing it yet, because we're not feeling ready.
And I want also, when it comes to goals, or you choose to start doing some exercises, prenatal or postnatal, it's choose something that's manageable. So instead of saying, like, I need to move 5 or 6 times a week because that's the prescription that we've kind of thrown out there for everything, I think you need to look at your life in this present moment. Physically, how do you feel? Emotionally, how do you feel? And mentally, how do you feel? And you can assess that and say, like, 5 or 6 times is not realistic. But moving maybe twice a week right now is realistic, because I find as soon as we write that goal down, it's like 5 or 6 times a week. And as soon as you miss 1 or 2 sessions, we're so hard on ourselves. And then motherhood is already hard. We're already so hard on ourselves. Over analyzing everything, creating anxiety over small things that that we need to, again, honor our bodies and give us grace.
Yeah.
And we need to set realistic goals with our present moment, so that sometimes it's like doing 10 squats in a day and lifting your baby 10 times, and that's your exercise.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and that's okay. So
Yeah.
you need to set something that's realistic so that it doesn't feel like failure if you can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some days, like I've had 2 boys already, and some days where I wrote it down, like if I can do 10 squats, if I can do 10 lunges, and at the end of the day I didn't do it, it's to look back and say, you know what, I was really tired, and laying on the couch finally during that time brought me more happiness and more like emotional balance than moving, then that's okay.
Then that's okay.
Yeah,
absolutely. Having that awareness and, like you say, that grace for ourselves around, if we don't reach that specific goal, we can look back and say, this is the choice I made instead, and that's okay because it felt good in that moment. We can also look ahead and say, like, okay, so my goal was to do those 10 squats and they didn't fit anywhere today. Where could I integrate them tomorrow? Is it,
when do I feel best?
When do I feel best? Or, is there a moment when I'm standing in the kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil that I could do like 3 of them?
Yeah, and that's where, like, if you're gonna jump into exercise, it's nice to understand that it's okay that it's broken up. Like a lot of women will say, like, I don't have an hour in my day. Good gosh, I don't think any one of us has an hour in their day, pregnant or postpartum or with kids or whatever, to sacrifice just 1 hour in your day to work out. If I can squeeze a 15-20 minute circuit in the morning, then with no disruption from kids, snack time, then that's like A plus. But also, if you think you can do 10 push-ups in the morning and then it's 7 p.m. at night and you're like, you know what, I feel kind of good and I can do 10 squats right now, that's the same thing as if you're putting it all together.
It adds up.
It adds up.
Yeah.
So I always say, move if you feel like moving, and when you move, do it when you want and when you can.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a 30-minute, like, you don't need to sweat. You can stay, if you follow me on Instagram, you've seen me, my morning circuits, I'm in my pajamas because changing is that extra step for me. That's like a barrier for me to go downstairs and actually move. So you can still be in your maternity bra and in your pajamas and still move. So I think, like, create less barriers around exercise, where you need to put sneakers on, where it needs to be a full sports bra, your baby has to have been sleeping, like all these rules around it create so much stress and anxiety towards moving, where if you say, like, you know what, I'm in a dress but I'll do 10 squats, you're still moving. And you're not creating barriers around, like, I can't do it because I didn't sweat. I don't have time to sweat. I don't have time to do my 10 minutes cardio I really wanted to do. That's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Amazing. All right. We're doing well on our time. I think that we might be able to squeeze in that last question that we had chatted about. And that is chatting briefly about the influence that social media can have on how we're moving our bodies prenatally and postpartum, what we need to be mindful of, and maybe where we need to lend ourselves that bit of space and grace again.
Yeah, I could.
We could do a whole one on this one.
Do a whole one on this one. But I think mainly if we speak to, like, the exercise prenatally and postnatally.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're on Facebook, so where they're on social media. And there's Instagram. So those two are 2 big influences in what we see every day and what we consume every day.
Yeah.
And the information, I think we need to be aware and acknowledge that the information we're getting on Facebook and Instagram isn't always the reality. Yeah. So I can take a photo at home, a beautiful setting of my kitchen with delicious food and there's no mess around. And you can perceive that as, I have it all my kids are well behaved, my kitchen is clean, my house is clean, like I've done everything, I'm in a sports bra, and you can perceive that as like, oh, she's got it all together.
She's doing it all. Yeah. Why can't I?
And what you don't see behind the camera is the dirty laundry that's been thrown across the room just to create that perfect photo.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be sensitive to what we're looking at and how we perceive it. And again, that's where the why and the external factors come in. So especially pregnant and postpartum.
Yeah.
We see so many photos of postpartum bodies after giving birth of like 3 weeks postpartum, and then there's this woman in a bikini who has lost a lot of baby weight and is back to running and all these things, and we need to ask ourselves how that makes us feel in that moment.
Yeah.
So if that makes you feel shame towards yourself, if that makes you feel sad, anxious, like a failure of any sort, then that information you're consuming is not positive for your life in that present moment. Like you should not be consuming that if those are the feelings you're getting.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be more strict on what we're scrolling through.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, it's all about grace. Like find, if you want to follow social accounts, find social accounts that go with your values, go with how you're feeling. Yeah. If you need to see a mom that has dirty laundry and is walking around in a sports bra and feels great about herself, then choose those accounts versus the ones that aren't bringing you any positive energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it comes to exercise, understand that everybody that's on Instagram and social media doesn't have a background in actual personal training with pregnant and postpartum women.
Yeah.
So you may see them move their bodies in certain ways and you're like, oh, that's what I should be doing.
Right. If you're seeing like a fitness coach
Influencer,
or something like that, an influencer of some sort who's pregnant themselves, and they're moving their bodies in a certain way, that might create an assumption that that's a safe way for me to move my body.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean, again, every body's different.
Yeah.
She may have symptoms and she's not she's not following through. Let's say,
here's this exercise and I'm peeing my pants while I'm doing it.
Exactly. That's basically what I wanted to say. But so I think you need to look at the information and then ask yourself questions after you look at the photo or the information and say, is this a valuable resource?
Yeah.
Does this person have the background information on exercise in prenatal and postnatal women? And also if it's just an influencer who's given birth and has gotten back into exercise and has lost weight, you need to ask yourself if those are things that are bringing you positive energy.
Yes.
And will encourage you to get moving again,
right,
with good goals and like realistic things versus being hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And
which way is it motivating you? Is it motivating you to feel guilty, to feel shameful, to do the exercise because you should be?
Yeah.
Or is it motivating you because it's like, wow, that postpartum body can do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I can do that too. And always going back to the listening to our bodies when it comes to no matter what stage of that process we're at.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of posting a photo or a video of something where you're like, okay, I'm gonna dress up my room and have everything cute.
Yeah.
But you've had a really shitty day. Sorry.
Yes.
and you've cried during the day and you've yelled at your kids, and that photo that you portray is not the reality of what your day looked like.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's we're all guilty of doing that sometimes. But it's understanding that our social media accounts are not reality unless you're fully honest. On it.
Yeah. And it might be posting like, I'm celebrating this moment because this moment looks and feels really good. But when somebody else looks at that, they can make the assumption that that's what the whole life looks like. Yeah. That's what the whole day looks like. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for this.
Having me.
And thank you to everybody who's tuned in live and to those folks who are watching the replay. The replay is going to stay here for a good long while. If you have any questions for Martine, or for myself, feel free to pop them in the comments below and we shall catch up with them. If you haven't already, please follow Martine over at the Mama Movement, both here on Facebook and on Instagram. And we shall hopefully talk to you and see you soon. Take good care, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.